Cast Away, 2000, movie synopsis by Ziller Movies Recapped. Chuck Nolan, Tom Hanks, is a techniques engineer for Federal Specific. He reveals some Moscow, Russia, workers how FedEx does enterprise. A very powerful factor he tells them about is time. That the bundle sorting have to be accomplished exactly on schedule. To show it, he opens a bundle he dispatched to himself from FedEx's headquarters and his residence base in Memphis, Tennessee, that incorporates a small timer. Chuck stops it at 87 hours, which he says is a deplorable supply time contemplating FedEx's chief enterprise technique of delivering packages in a single day. Whereas yelling on the workers, the translator brings up a previous incident, the place Chuck stole a child's bike when his supply car broke down. Chuck insists that the story has been hyperbolized and that he merely borrowed the bike and that he nonetheless acquired his deliveries executed. Chuck launches the crew into the bundle type with a time restrict of 3 hours. With quarter hour left, the type is threatened when one of many Moscow workplaces' vehicles is booted in Purple Square. The bundle sorting is carried out on the street. He calls his girlfriend, Kelly, Helen Hunt, and leaves a message saying he'll be again there in lower than 24 hours and that he must see a dentist for a tooth that is bothering him. After the type is finished and he is again on the airport, he talks to his coworker and buddy Stan, Nick Searcy. One of many crew asks about Stan's spouse, who's been battling most cancers and is not doing nicely. The temper turns somber and Chuck seems to be considerate concerning the information. Chuck returns to Memphis, FedEx headquarters, and visits Kelly, who's a PhD scholar. Throughout dinner along with her household on Christmas Eve, he will get a message that he must go to Malaysia. They drive to his departure level on the airport and so they change their Christmas items. He offers her a bunch of kitchen objects. She offers him an vintage watch that belonged to her grandfather. Contained in the lid is an image of her. Chuck is sort of taken with the watch and guarantees her he'll at all times maintain it set to Memphis time to remind him to come back residence. Proper earlier than he leaves for his airplane, he offers her a small ring field. Although it isn't proven explicitly, it is an engagement ring. He deliberate to suggest on new 12 months' eve, however determined to do it earlier. He tells her, "Sick be proper again." He's the one passenger and rides within the leap seat of a FedEx Cargo MD-11 throughout the Pacific Ocean. Chuck wakes up when the airplane bumps in some turbulence. The airplane has encountered a fierce storm. The pilots try and fly round it, however they've fallen out of radio contact with Fiji. Chuck goes to the toilet to clean up a bit. Immediately the door flies open and Chuck is sort of sucked out of the airplane as a result of depressurization. He will get again to his seat and is given a life raft by one of many crew. The airplane goes straight down and crashes within the ocean. Water rushes into the fuselage in a flash. Chuck makes it to the floor and climbs within the raft, seeing one of many engines explode. Chuck passes out and is washed onto the shore of a really small tropical island. He discovers instantly that his pager is waterlogged and that Kelly's watch is equally ruined. He additionally finds out in a short time that he is alone, although the sound of falling coconuts trick him into pondering another person could also be stalking him. Determined to seek out meals and contemporary water, Chuck spends a prolonged time making an attempt to open a coconut. When throwing them at a big rock and smashing them on a smaller rock fail, he makes use of a pointy rock to lastly lower the shell. He is additionally in a position to spear small crabs, however with none hearth to prepare dinner them, they are not a great meal supply. He explores the island, discovering a small cave within the rock and finds a complete of 11 FedEx packages from the crash which have washed ashore. He additionally discovers the physique of one of many planes' pilots and buries him. At evening on the seashore, Chuck sees the lights of a ship. Utilizing a small flashlight he recovered from the physique of the pilot, he tries to sign the ship, however is unsuccessful. The subsequent morning he makes an attempt to go away the island within the rubber raft from the jet. The excessive breakers over the coral reef surrounding the island flip the raft over. He is tossed onto the reef and his thigh is badly lacerated. Recovering from the accident, he begins to construct a easy camp and opens the FedEx parcels. He discovers a number of objects that support him in his survival, together with a pair of ice skates, a leather-based and lace gown, videotapes and an authorized doc declaring a divorce. One other parcel incorporates a volleyball that finally turns into his companion. One of many parcels is adorned with a pair of wings, and for unexplained causes he would not open it. He tries to construct a hearth by rubbing a stick towards a bit of wooden, however cuts his hand. In a fury, he grabs the volleyball and throws it. His lower hand leaves a bloody imprint on the ball, and from that he provides in a face, naming it by its model identify, Wilson. The ball turns into his companion. Some day later he describes to Wilson the flight path of his jet in comparison with its final recognized place and calculates that the search space is over 500,000 square miles, twice the scale of Texas. He realizes it's uncertain that he'll ever be discovered. Chuck makes use of the lace from the gown as a fishing internet, consuming a small minnow he catches uncooked, although he is clearly repulsed by it. He additionally spends a prolonged period of time rubbing two sticks collectively to construct a hearth. The method is irritating, however Chuck perseveres, refining his method, and at last will get a big hearth going. Chuck creates a rudimentary residence in a small cave that shields him from tropical storms that sometimes hit the island. Nonetheless affected by the tooth that was bothering him earlier than he left Memphis, it has obsessed and is extraordinarily painful and swollen. Determined, he lastly resorts to utilizing the sharp finish of an ice skate blade with a rock as a hammer to extract the tooth. 4 years move. Chuck has misplaced greater than 50 kilos and his hair and beard are lengthy and unkempt. He survives day to day. Throughout a storm, 2 of the partitions of a damaged fiberglass transportable bathroom are tossed on shore. When he sees it blown by the wind, he's abruptly energized with the thought of constructing a raft that may use the fiberglass partitions like a makeshift sail that would probably get him over the bigger breakers surrounding the island. He chops down bushes and lays out his raft. To tie the poles collectively, he braids rope from native tree bark and from the videotape. He counts the times essential to catch the northeast commerce winds that he hopes will take him into the delivery lanes and rescue. Chuck is not sure the place he's headed, however figures that he would somewhat die at sea than spend the remainder of his life alone on the island. At one level he imagines that Wilson is telling him the plan will not work and he punts Wilson out of his cave. Instantly remorseful, Chuck runs exterior and finds Wilson, apologizing to him. Chuck prepares meals, water, and different requirements for his escape. He additionally tells Wilson that he must make rope once more. Chuck cuts down saplings on the island and peels the bark from them to braid. When he finishes scouring the island and finds he is lower down each sapling he can, he tells Wilson he must make the remainder of the rope from videotape, which will not be as sturdy because the tree bark. When Wilson suggests the place Chuck see and get extra rope, Chuck turns into very reluctant. The additional rope was a size Chuck had made when he was considering suicide just a few years earlier than. Chuck climbs to the highest of the island's peak and retrieves the rope, which he'd tied to a dummy of himself to check it. Chuck ties his companion, Wilson, and the FedEx parcel adorned with wings to the raft. With the brand new sail and a pair of makeshift oars, he is in a position to sail over the reef surf and escape the island and lagoon. He sails for a lot of encounters, just a few storms. The sail doubles as a shelter, and continues fishing and gathering rainwater to outlive. Sooner or later, following a heavy storm, an exhausted Chuck is woke up by water in his face, apparently from the spout of a whale, and sees Wilson floating away. He tries to rescue Wilson, however, afraid of shedding the raft, he's pressured to let Wilson go. He's despondent over shedding Wilson. He has practically given up hope of rescue when he's wakened by one other whale's spout. He turns over to see a container ship passing shut by. They sign that they've seen him. A month later, Chuck is flown residence to Memphis and is the visitor of honor at a big company-organized welcome reception. On the airplane again, he talks to Stan, who tells Chuck that they had a funeral with a coffin that they crammed with small objects in Chuck's honor. Stan's spouse additionally had handed away throughout Chuck's time away, and Chuck displays on how Stan needed to undergo 2 funerals very shut collectively. The reception is attended by FedEx's president, Fred Smith, in a cameo look, and a big buffet is served. Chuck seems to be thoughtfully on the massive crab legs that have been served, maybe pondering of fishing for crabs on the island. Kelly meant to satisfy Chuck on the celebration, however she is feeling very confused. Her husband, Chris Noth, an orthodontist that did dental work on Chuck, apologizes for her absence. He tells Chuck that Kelly is having a troublesome time dealing with his sudden reappearance. He asks Chuck to present her extra time. Looking of the window, he sees Kelly in tears, comforted by her husband, and watches her get in an automotive and depart. Later that night, Chuck takes a taxi to Kelly's residence. She appears to be anticipating him and invitations him inside. They speak about little issues and he discovers how a lot her life and ambitions have modified and the way she coped together with his presumed loss of life. Chuck offers Kelly again the watch she had given him, telling her that it's a household heirloom and will stay in her household. She tells him that the corporate presumed a hazardous bundle caught Hearth and prompted the crash. She reveals him that his island was greater than 600 miles from the Cook Dinner Islands round which the search had been performed. He had drifted 500 miles in his raft earlier than he was discovered. He decides to maintain her image. She offers him the keys to his Jeep which she had saved. They apologize to one another for all that has occurred and he drives off slowly within the pouring rain. Kelly abruptly runs after him, shouting his identify. He backs up and so they embrace fiercely within the pouring rain. She tells him that she at all times believed he was alive, however that others mentioned she needed to transfer on. She tells him that he is the love of her life. He says he loves her too. They discuss for just a few extra minutes in his automotive, however Chuck tells Kelly that she must go residence, signifying his respect for her transferring on along with her life. Chuck later describes the assembly with Kelly to Stan, and the way he understands and accepts that whereas they are going to at all times love one another, their lives have gone in several instructions and so they can't be collectively. He confesses to the utter despair and helplessness he felt on the island, describes his failed try at suicide, and the W.I. he obtained assurance that he was presupposed to stay and got here to phrases together with his isolation. Whereas he has simply misplaced her once more, he accepts it and understands he has to take stay in the future at a time since you by no means know what the tide will deliver. He drives to Texas with the FedEx bundle adorned with wings in his Jeep. He makes an attempt to ship it at a ranch with a wrought iron gate studying Bettina, however nobody is there. He leaves it on the door with a observe stating that the parcel saved his life. He drives south and at a four-way intersection and will get out of his automotive to have a look at a map. A pleasant, fairly girl in an outdated pickup truck stops and asks him if he's misplaced. Smiling, he confesses he hasn't made up his thoughts the place he was going. She tells him the place the four roads lead, and that north, the course Chuck had simply come from, results in a complete lot of nothingness all the way in which to Canada. She drives north and as she pulls away, Chuck spots the identical pair of wings that have been on the bundle on the tailgate of her truck. Chuck walks to the middle of the intersection and appears in every course for just a few seconds. He then turns north and his gaze lingers within the course the lady drove. Summaries: a FedEx government undergoes a bodily and emotional transformation after crash touchdown on a abandoned island. Memphis-based FedEx operations government Chuck Noland and grad scholar Kelly Frears have lengthy dated and lived collectively, and regardless of every being the love of the opposite's life, haven't gotten married due to their respective busy schedules, particularly Chuck says he's extra usually on enterprise journeys than he's at residence. That marital standing adjustments when on Christmas Day 1995 as Chuck is dashing off to catch one more FedEx airplane for a enterprise journey, he offers Kelly a hoop. That flight experiences technical difficulties, and goes down someplace within the South Pacific. In a life raft, a comparatively unhurt Chuck washes up on shore what he'll be taught as a abandoned island, he unaware what has occurred to any of his fellow flightmates, or the airplane. Nonetheless, a number of the packages on board for supply do wash up on shore with him, these packages which he initially treats with respect. Chuck realizes that his precedence is survival, which primarily means meals, water, shelter and hearth, and rescue. However, survival can be in an emotional sense. To meet that emotional want, he has an heirloom pocket watch with Kelly's picture that she gave him as a Christmas current, and finally opening the FedEx packages, a Wilson volleyball on which he paints a face and which he names Wilson. As time progresses, Chuck goes by a variety of feelings, but when rescue is ever within the playing cards, he realizes that he has to discover a approach to get off the island, which is seemingly unimaginable in his circumstance as a result of sturdy on-shore surf he can't get past without help. What Chuck could not totally understand is the longer he's not rescued, the tougher it is going to be for him to return to his outdated life in its entirety if he ever is rescued. Though the considered Kelly is what largely retains him motivated to be rescued, Kelly, who in all probability believes him to be lifeless, could have moved on emotionally from him for the time being. Flying from one nation to a different, troubleshooting issues and arranging bundle transfers all around the world, the pushed however overworked and time-obsessed federal-specific government, Chuck Noland, resides a busy life. In 1995, towards the backdrop of the approaching new 12 Months' Eve, an unexpected complication forces Noland to go away his unhappy however understanding girlfriend, Kelly, behind, and catch a airplane to Malaysia, solely to finish up marooned on an uncharted, uninhabited island in the midst of the Pacific Ocean. Immediately, for the primary time in a protracted whereas, Chuck has on a regular basis on this planet, nonetheless, bereft of the comforts of civilization, tending to his elementary wants now turns into a continuing battle. Now, Chuck, the one dwelling soul on the islet, should summon up the power to outlive. However, can he resist despair, and preserve hope to remain alive? After FedEx Techniques engineer Chuck Noland is ripped out of his hasty life by the clock in an airplane crash, he finds himself alone on the shores of a tropical island. First, frustration will get to him, after which he realizes how little his likelihood is to ever get again to civilization. 4 years later, Chuck has realized very nicely survive on his personal, mending his dental well-being, catching fish with a spear, predicting the climate with a self-made calendar. A photograph of his girlfriend Kelly has saved his hopes alive all these years. Lastly, Chuck takes the chance to take off for residence. He units off on a wood raft with a sail that has washed ashore. Chuck Noland is a FedEx supervisor who calls for that all the pieces have to be on time and travels the world to verify punctuality is on high of all the pieces else. He has a girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he's deeply in love with and household he hardly sees. When work intrudes on Christmas Eve, Chuck has a fast present change within the automotive and kisses Kelly goodbye. He boards a supply airplane going abroad which will get caught in a horrendous storm and crashes into the Pacific. The only survivor Chuck washes up on a distant island together with a number of FedEx packages that he should use for provides. With restricted luxurious, he adapts to the island over the course of 1,500 nights. When Chuck lastly sees his likelihood, he rafts out on the ocean and happily is noticed. After a bittersweet welcome back reception, Chuck finds Kelly has married one other man and has youngsters. However, he's lacking greater than her. For all his life his goal was work. For 4 years, it was survival. Now Chuck is compelled to stay. Chuck, a high worldwide supervisor for FedEx, and Kelly, a PhD scholar, are in love and heading in direction of marriage. Then Chuck's airplane to Malaysia ditches at sea throughout a horrible storm. He is the one survivor, and he washes up on a tiny island with nothing however some flotsam and jetsam from the plane's cargo. Can he survive on this tropical wasteland? Will he ever return to girl he loves?